Pino, I see one of our voting members, and along with our emeritus member, former Representative Rick Mira, and Christina Rogers, who's an alternate from Borellis, Courtney Bell, and others on the call. So thanks for being here, and we'll get started. Members present will go around for introductions, and I am expecting the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who's also on this board, to attend. I know he's a very busy man, but I wanted him to be able to say a few words. If he gets on, we'll give him we'll interrupt the meeting and give a quick briefing to him, because he's only got about a half an hour if he gets on. So appreciate his attendance, but we'll see about that. But meanwhile, and we'll wait for going around the table and doing introductions and see if he gets on, since we're going to be doing that when he does get on. But we do have a quorum now, and we'll get going. And I'll start by making a motion to approve the minutes of November 15th of the special meeting. Is there a second?
A second.
Second from Representative Garcia. And all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. And opposed? That passes unanimously. And we're going to go straight into the rail yards master plan update. And then again, Nathan, we've got a pop-up on the screen. Can we get that off? Okay, good. So I'm going to move the one action plan, which is the approval or our recommendation of the railroads master plan update, and sending that on for approval by the planning commission and council. And we have our consultants here, and I'll go ahead and let our consultant and Petra start with their introduction.
I think everyone that's here has heard about what we're proposing with this master plan update, but just in case folks that are on Zoom, are you able to hear me okay on Zoom?
Everyone on the Zoom hear us?
Okay.
Yeah, just fine. Thank you.
So this update to the master plan is just to catch up the master plan with the changes that have occurred since 2014. The administration has made some really significant and exciting improvements to the north end of the site, and so the master plan has been updated to reflect that. But in terms of the document, probably the biggest change is that we no longer have a master developer, Samattar Constructs, and so the bulk of the changes in this master plan update are to reflect that Samattar and their concepts are no longer on the table. This is our third or fourth meeting with the Rail Yards Advisory Board on this. We have been doing a red line version of the document where language to be struck is either struck through, or if there's an image to be removed, it has a red X on it. And the new text is in red and underlined so that the public can see where we're making changes to the document. The two kind of bigger changes that have rippled out of this is that Samattar proposed a parcelization of the site to break the site up into 10 parcels. And that controlled the land use as well as the parking for the site. And what we are proposing is that the land uses, instead of being limited to particular uses on particular parcels on the site, that all of the uses listed be allowed throughout the site as opportunities come forward and are presented. And so this provides a great deal more flexibility for the site without changing any of the intents that the community came around in 2014 in the proposal of the master plan. And then in terms of the parking, the master plan talks about a number for the final build out, and we're proposing to strike that language per the direction of the advisory board at the last meeting. it's hard to know how many spaces are really going to be able to be accommodated on the site, and how they would be accommodated and what those final users would be. And so the number that was proposed was pretty arbitrary. And so what we have is that the planning commission will approve parking as development comes in, and that gives us a great deal more flexibility to recognize that yes, there will be parking, but there are also other ways of getting to the site, and that will also change as different users come on. At the last meeting, we had a draft amendments to make a couple of corrections to the master plan that had been called with folks reviewing and editing the document. Those have been incorporated into the version that's before you today, as well as some language. We had an extensive conversation about noise, and that has been incorporated into section 6. And then we also incorporated some language about the recent agreement with the 2926 New Mexico Railroad Historical Society and their maintenance for the maintenance work for the turntable area. So that's a quick overview of the proposal and the version that's before you today. It's also on the project website if anyone wants to take a look.
Sorry, just interrupted by a rudely interrupted by a text. All right, so we're going to go to Ms. Fishman.
Okay, I'm Jackie Fishman with Consensus Planning, principal, main person in our firm working on the update to the plan. I think Petra did a very nice overview, and I was also going to bring people's attention to the new section on noise, which hadn't been in the previous master development plan. At the last meeting, we talked about, there was a lot of concern about noise. And I said that I would look at what we wrote in the Bloomfield Park Master Development Plan, also had a noise section. So we looked at that, we customized it for the rail yards, and that, as Petra said, is in section 6 on page 72. Other changes that we made are, per the comments that we received, and I'm just here ready to answer any questions or take any other further comments before we move forward.
And just for the public's information, the board has had the draft and various versions of this draft in their hands for over half a year now, I believe, where we've been able to look at it and had a good discussion at the last meeting. However, we did not have a quorum, and that's why we have this special meeting today. We are going to also later in the meeting get an update from the administration on a couple of exciting, well, one maybe not so exciting but gratifying, having to do with the firehouse, and the other one having to do with CNM and their presence on the site in the future. So I guess we'll should at this point, I mean, just open it up to board members for discussion. But again, we took very much to heart the neighborhood representatives' thoughts about noise and experiences with the noise on the site to date. A lot of that had to do with programming at the blacksmith shop. And, so, I mean, these are operational issues, but we wanted to make sure that they were stated in the plan more directly. And we also, of course, this site will be subject to the city's noise ordinance, as well as any site, any noise generated from any site in the city, whether residential, commercial, industrial, are all subject to that noise ordinance. And but we wanted to call specific attention to that. And but otherwise, it's pretty much the plan we've been looking at now for some time. And also to emphasize to the public, this is not some major revamp of the site plan of the rail yards or how we anticipate it unfolding in the future as more tenants come along. and as different uses come along, whether they be temporary or permanent uses. Nothing really has changed about that. What we wanted to do was simply take the plan that was there, that was really had so many elements. It was actually developed by the previous developer, but take the parts that had already previously been approved by this board and by the council and the planning commission, and clean that up. And as Petra said, all this parcelization of the site had to do with the previous developer. It didn't make any sense at this point to continue that parcelization. But we also recognized that all of those uses that were in there were legitimate and had been vetted and by this board and others, and with regard to those uses, and that they should be allowed throughout the site pending an actual application for a lease or for a proposed development along the lines of what Lawrence is going to discuss later in the meeting with regard to the CNM partnership. So, but I'll open it up for question and discussion from the board members.
Someone with their hand up.
Who has the iPad?
That's Jay Remby.
Oh, that's Jay. I'm sorry, Jay.
No worries.
Only showing up as iPad, so welcome to the meeting as a voting member as well.
I'll try to name that.
Urban Land Institute. So
Are you at home? Maybe it's while you're at your pad.
he's at, it's my pad, not iPad. Okay, go ahead, Jay.
Oh, I didn't realize my hand was up, but I would just defer to, the neighborhood representatives and make sure they feel comfortable with some of the language. I know noise was a big concern in our last meeting. So that's really all I have to add.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the board?
There is one thing, where we're saying that you can use, we're taking out restrictions that anything can be used anywhere. Recently with the RFP that put out for one of the buildings in the beginning, which is narrowed down to forget the name. What was the name of it?
Oh, you're talking about the Spirit Station?
Spirit Station.
Yeah. Something like that, I think would be better representative further into the site rather than right on the street. I think something that's right on the street should be something more in tune with the residential area. And, maybe small grocery store or laundromat or, a little restaurant or something like that, in the Spirit Station. There's been a huge history in our neighborhood with alcohol. Actually, we closed down most of the bars in that area because of the problems with alcohol. So I'd like that to be considered also.
Would staff or consultant want to respond to that? I know that was a Metropolitan Redevelopment response to MR RFP, and that it's really, I don't believe it's any longer viable. Mr. Ryle?
No, that one, we did an RFP, and we did have a very interesting proposal. It was almost quasi restaurant, if you will, with some obviously with an alcohol sort of piece to it, but it never really came together. The financing and the structure was never really finalized. So the interesting news, at least for the conversation today, is that it's not moving forward. And so I think the one thing that's really interesting is that when you look at the buildings that are for front Second Street that are still left to be developed, the firehouse is the most significant of them in terms of and it's a small building. And then you have the other buildings next to it. It's pretty hard to get, I think, a big establishment into those buildings unless they're gonna add more to the buildings or create more space around them. So I do think that those will be the opportunities for the community to be involved with how those get developed, just simply because of the size of the buildings and the uses that might be there. You know, there's a lot of interest in the firehouse from lots of folks. To include folks that want to, you know, maybe put some kind of a restaurant there. Maybe as that develops, et cetera, and through that process, we'll have more input in terms of how the community feels about, you know, how it's going to be utilized, et cetera. But right now, there's not any, at least not any uses at this moment that are fully ahead to say, yeah, we're going to do this over there.
Because I know the Spirit Station had requested to move to a different building there.
Right.
And then when we talked to, when they came to us, you know, we suggested they probably have better use further inside where
Sure.
they can expand easier too. And it's not like right in our face.
You know, one site that has always been discussed for restaurant or, you know, which now in the modern world, they typically do serve liquor, but a restaurant type use has been the firehouse, which we're gonna have a discussion about that also today. Just an update, a quick update, but that one, everyone has always kind of coalesced thinking that, yeah, that could be a good place for that. That is near the neighborhood edge as well.
I think that is okay. I mean, we kind of even talked about it, if they did like maybe a farm to restaurant,
Mhm.
you know, there's a little
Sure.
bit of
Sure.
property there that they can actually do some, you know, grow some of their own food and serve it type of thing.
Mhm.
So we kind of always thought that too, but when you get something that sounds, it's gonna be alcohol. I mean, that's a little more in your face.
And you know, there's a whole permitting process for that as well, where there's public vetting and special hearing officers and so forth. And that process is actually managed through the city council, so we'll be well aware if somebody's applying for something along those lines, and we'll have the opportunity for the public and the neighborhoods to weigh in on anything like that. Other discussion from board members. Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned on the addition to the plan regarding the noise issue, of which we had a very vibrant discussion at our last meeting. You mentioned that you kind of were working off of a similar concept at the Balloon Fiesta. So how, what exactly was the specific language that you incorporated into the noise component for the rail yards? How does that read?
It's quite a long section, so I don't know if you want me to read it in its entirety, but it's just.
Well, especially that part that is specific to the rail yards that is not found in the Balloon Fiesta language. Because you said that you basically modeled this addition to the Balloon Fiesta.
Yeah, and it was customized. I think the Balloon Fiesta Park Master Development Plan was a good precedent. And we had, there's a lot of neighborhoods around that facility who also expressed a lot of concern. I think in Balloon Fiesta, it's really more about amplified sound from speakers and things like that. So some of that was taken out, the specificity of it. But the section talks about the city's noise ordinance, how noise is measured from the receptor, not from the generator of the noise. And we've got the weighted measurements from the noise ordinance I put into this section as well. And as Petra said, it's I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 paragraphs. That's sort of a very broad overview. It also talks about, environmental health being responsible for any complaints. in cultural affairs department as well, and then the noise control criteria. So I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
And cultural services has been the department that's been responsible for the operation of one-off type events in the blacksmith shop. And I think that was, that's the city department, and they have a responsibility to our constituents and our neighbors. Frankly, I say that that's an operational issue, but I think there was a breakdown there with regard to the contact information that was needed from that department. That isn't the kind of detail that would normally go into a site development plan. But I think emphasizing the importance of noise through this master plan gives it an extra impetus that will not be acceptable for us to have amplified events there without the neighborhood having probably at least one phone number that knows somebody's going to answer the phone, or a backup number as well from that department for any future events of that sort.
Yeah, and I would add, just, Mr. Chairman, keep in mind that there's two pieces to this work that really is interesting. One is that the buildings themselves, because of the condition of the windows and the condition of the building themselves, and our interest in basically getting them open so that the community can enjoy them and can see how amazing they are. And also because they are decent venues, if you will, for some activities. The noise that happens inside, obviously, spreads outside the windows very quickly, because in most cases there are no windows, or the windows are pretty in bad shape. So I guess the point that I'm making is that as we move to redevelop some of those buildings, and particularly the blacksmith shop, which is one of the buildings that is, I think, we'd like to see get more investment in, just because of its flexibility and use. With putting windows in and putting in more, if you will, hopefully acoustical sort of modalities inside the building, will hopefully help control the noise and help it be at least a much quieter space, given the fact that it is so close to the neighborhood, especially to the east. So I think that's one important piece. The other piece is just also considering the square, if you will, that's between the tender repair shop and the flue shop and the open area right there that we've created for public events, etc. I think that there is a real good important opportunity for us to make sure that we do notify the neighborhoods when events of those are occurring, and try and limit those events. So I will make sure that we talk to our cultural affairs department as we're scheduling events, that we make sure we are cognizant about those issues. But it is a public space, and it is an opportunity for folks to gather. And a lot of times sometimes I've heard the noise more, not from the bands or the loudspeakers, but just from people talking to each other, which can reverberate because of the way the walls are of those buildings around that area. But very sensitive to that issue. So to your point, Counselor, making sure that we have the right notifications to the neighborhoods, etc. But I do think with more investment in that area, to include potentially some trees, etc., that may help buffer some of that noise. And as we activate the space, hopefully that noise will get less and less of an issue for the community.
And I'm gonna get to you just a second, Eddie. And there has been some discussion either temporarily, I guess I should say, in the short term, or permanently replacing windows on that east wall.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And there's a couple of opportunities that we're looking at. Obviously, the cost to replace those windows is pretty significant. But there may be some other ways for us to muffle the noise, to include potentially some kind of a curtain lining or something like that might be a lot easier to put up and modify on a case-by-case basis to try and muffle some of that noise. But I really would like to, Counselor, and for everyone who's interested in this, I mean, I really would like to see us invest at least on that east side of that building to ensure that we can put some, clean up the windows and get that side at least fixed up so that that noise doesn't just bounce out that direction. For the west side, because of the flu shop, et cetera, and what's there, it kind of helps muffle it. Not that I'm ignoring the west side, because I also am very sensitive to that too, but the cost associated with replacing those is pretty significant, so we're working through that, and hopefully our friend at the legislature might help us with a little bit additional funding to help get that done, but it is a great space, and I think everybody agrees that, the events that happen there, like the market, et cetera, really bring the community together, and it's a good opportunity for us to do some better work there.
Eddie?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Real. I appreciate all the effort being done for the noise ordinance thing. The thing is, you have to remember. The noise is projected in one area, but it's deflected out. So a buffer or some kind of something between on the east side to try to buffer some of that sound, because noise is made to project out, because you get the front of it here. But behind over there, like these people here, when here, it gets set back there. So it travels. You can put up windows and all sorts of stuff, but it's still made to project. And having a flyer maybe go out, I know it could be costing to the neighborhood, notifying them that there is something. And us having a number that, from at 10 o'clock it cuts off, 11 o'clock it cuts out, whatever it is, that we can have a number where we can call and actually get cut off at 10 or 11 o'clock.
No, I think that, good point, Mr. Chairman. Good point, Eddie. Well, that is a for sure thing that we've already instructed the department to begin to do that kind of work, and to create a number that is where someone can answer the phone and get the information from the neighborhood, et cetera. So we'll get that put together and make sure we circulate that as well.
Let's get to you, Leva, in just a
Sure,
second.
sure.
And one thing we have to also discuss, and this would be an offsite improvement, so it wouldn't appear on this plan, right?
Right.
But I think there's potential on the city right away of the street. Is it commercial across the street at that point?
Right.
That along commercial, that we take a look at the right of way and see if we could put a nice line of trees along there, and they might even be evergreen trees that are just all year long, or whatever is deemed to be the most appropriate. And it could be a beautification thing for the neighborhood, but also could be helpful. And so I'd be totally supportive of looking at that, and maybe we look for some funding for that in the capital improvement program this year at the city's capital improvement program. Leva.
I'm here to give good news. First of all, I want to thank everybody at the table, on the screen, and in the room for all the help all these years. And I want to tell you that Wheels Museum has become highly successful. We are getting visitors in from all over the world almost every day. Fabulous new exhibits. We were offered a fire truck this morning. We could put it in the firehouse. We made a fire museum there, which I've mentioned in the past. We are now working with the Lego company, with Hot Wheels, with several other educational institutions. We're working closely with Rail Runner. I want to thank Lawrence and everyone for all the help. We're really making progress. We're ready to expand. We're bursting at the seams. So it's been a long trip, but we're very, very optimistic about the future of Wheels on the Rail Yard. So want you to know that.
Great to hear.
Yeah,
Great to
yeah,
hear.
thank you. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
and just the exciting developments too of the 29-26
Yes.
has always been interested in the site, and to have them there assisting us, really assisting a public in the restoration of a public facility around the turntable and so forth is really gratifying as well. So,
Yes,
and we got
absolutely.
some other good news later about CNM, and I think we're gonna have, we always say eyes on the street is the best deterrent for vandalism and crime and so forth. So activity that's on the site is going to continue to improve security on the site as well. Other discussion or comments? Senator TC Pino, do you have any words of wisdom for us? We know you had to leave early at the last meeting, but we really appreciate both Senator TC Pino and our Rail Yards Advisory Board delegation, if you will, to the legislature with Representative Garcia, and previously Rick Nira, who's on the call, has really been helpful to us, and we appreciate that over the years.
No, the only thing I'm hoping at some point you'll advise us if there's going to be a request for capital outlay this year. So eager to hear if that's gonna happen and how, and what it would be for.
I'll hand that over to Lawrence.
Mr. Chairman and Senator, I too want to express my thanks to you and to Representative Garcia and all the members of the legislature who have helped in the past, including the Honorable Rick Mira there, now a resident of Corrales, I hear. Anyway, Senator,
A town council member, I think.
yeah, oh, that's right, he is a council member.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah.
Watch out.
I did remember that he finally went to the level of government where the rubber is under the road. But anyway, to the legislators, first of all, thanks as always for all the support. And we all know we would not be where we are with the redevelopment of that entire area without the support from the state, from the governor, and from you all and your support. So certainly the infusion of in the first years of Governor Grisham's term and back in the day, there was probably the biggest contribution to that project ever, as best I can tell from the state. And so we continue to move through the process now of redeveloping. So the priorities are going to be to try and get additional funds to stabilize the blacksmith shop and get that into a condition for CO occupancy for sure. And then beginning to look at some of the mediation and environmental mediation that needs to happen on the south side of the machine shop. You know, the machine shop itself is a significant investment, and we're having a review now in terms of what could be the best opportunity for us to get some funds for that. It's the roof alone. My friend Ed Adams here, who is our project manager on the construction side, tells me that just the roof alone is something in the neighborhood of $17 million. You can imagine this, the span of that building is significant. And as they say, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. Well, this is a big elephant, but nonetheless, we're putting together our proposal to you, Representative and Senator, and we'll get that to you here in the next week or so. The number off the top of my head is still being reviewed and evaluated, because we want to make sure we can at least deal with what Eddie and everyone has talked about here as it relates to the use of the blacksmith shop, that we mitigate the noise by putting in the windows and fixing the building up so the noise stays contained as best we can, but that it also is available for occupancy so that we can have indoor events, every day of the year. Right now, it's only really used in the summertime and early spring or late spring and early fall, because the facility is not heated or cooled. So it needs a lot of work. So we'll get those numbers to you and present that to you, but I really appreciate you asking about that, and we'll keep working with you all.
Well, thank you, Lawrence and Mr. Chairman. The only thing I would say is these changes are ones we've thoroughly analyzed. The noise ordinance, the noise changes were, I guess, the anti-noise policy was one that the one addition to what we had discussed previously where I've been involved, and it sounds like the neighborhoods are happy with it, so I'm all for these changes.
Thank you, Senator. Other comments? If not, is there a motion for a recommendation of approval of the update of the plan?
I move to adopt.
Okay, motion from Representative Garcia. Is there a second? Dorothy, thank you. And we'll go to a vote on our recommendation. All those in favor, say yes and raise your hands.
Yes.
Yes. See?
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed?
For sure.
No opposition. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, board members. We'll now move to the update from the administration on CNM at the rail yard.
Mr. Chairman and committee members and members in the audience, this project has been a project that we've been working on ever since Mayor Keller, I think, came into office. Within the first 6 or 8 months, we actually signed a letter of intent with Central New Mexico Community College with then President Winograd. basically looking at a partnership between the city and CNM on the use of and or providing some educational opportunities at the rail yards. Through the course of time and conversation and a lot of time, we're happy that we're at a point now where we've actually have 2 agreements with CNM that actually are I think significant and have created, if you will, the inertia to really redevelop one of the major buildings there on the site. The first agreement was with CNM. We entered into back, I'm going to say is probably like August, late August, which was to create a opportunity for CNM to use the flu shop to hold classrooms or to have classes there on an interim basis for their digital and film program at CNM. And the idea here was that we is activating the space, as I think the Councilor Benton mentioned earlier, with more activation and more use of the space than the issues associated with trying to keep people out become more about making sure that the right people are in there and that we're activating the space and creating more of an activity center for the community and for the city. So as a result, CNM commitment was to hold some classrooms there and to hold classes, I should say, in the facility, and also to use some of the buildings for their film and digital program. That contract was really a 3 or 4 month contract to the remainder of that semester at CNM, which really expired at the end of December. There's some interest in continuing to use the flu shop going into this fall semester. We're still working on those to update that agreement, but again, it will be not on a day-to-day basis because they don't hold all their classes every day, but to do some classroom work there at least 2 or 3 times a week, and hopefully continue to provide opportunities for education for folks who want to be in the film and digital program. The other major investment is a conversation we've been having with the state of New Mexico and with CNM to potentially locate a film academy on the site that would potentially utilize the boiler shop. All the details of that project are still in negotiations and discussions, but if it comes together, it would be an opportunity to really create a major, if you will, investment in the yards in a facility that really is one of the prime facilities, obviously, for in that north side of the yards, and so we're working on that to see how that comes together. But in my opinion, that kind of opportunity, and just as for everyone's information, the Bareilles neighborhood in particular is working with us on potentially what's called a community agreement, so that we can create a summer, maybe even through the course of the year, programs and opportunities for the neighborhoods and particularly the young people from the neighborhoods to be able to access the projects that are going to be occurring on the site, and to provide some, if you will, educational opportunities and youth opportunities for the community that would include South Broadway and Bareilles as a way to ensure that we're creating some value for the neighborhoods as well. And so those discussions are ongoing, but we're not quite there yet, but that's the goal, and it feels like we're headed in the right direction. I'd love to be able to give you all the more details, but a lot of those details are still being worked out. But the idea is to activate that space and really create a more day-to-day, if you will, activation of the facility that will really, I think, be a really great cornerstone for the redevelopment of the yards.
Thank you. Liba?
Thank you. 2 things. I want to make it clear to everyone that at Wheels, we have a conference room for 49 people. So we are always available for educational opportunities or classes or anything that anyone wishes to bring to us. We're doing events constantly, and field trips and disabled people, every kind of people. So we always have that available, plus tours of the museum, presentations and all that. The other thing is I'm constantly being asked about the flu shop and the boiler shop. If someone would come that and need to use it for something like to use it, would they be theoretically available through cultural at this time? There's no leases or anybody now, so theoretically that could be something someone could
Yeah.
temporarily for something.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll continue to use all of those buildings that
Okay.
are available
Okay, good.
on a lease by
Yeah.
lease basis.
Okay,
for
good.
Short-term leases.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, I think previously we were talking more with CNM about the tender repair shop, but in a way, this is a better fit because the flu shop has a
Right.
connection to the boiler shop. Representative Garcia.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Lawrence, on the perspective of CNM using one of the building sites for classrooms, from an economic point of view, considering the improvements or maybe lack of improvements of the facility, why would they want to invest time in having a class out of these buildings if they can kind of have that same classroom at the main campus, without kind of these issues of heat and air conditioning and security, safety, etc. Happen at their main campus. That's one question. The other question is, that whatever program CNM initiates out of the rail yard, I think should have an outcome of producing a product that kind of celebrates the rail yards. And that could be the development of the students possibly working on a script for a movie that maybe involves a family, maybe involves accidents, maybe involves, kind of positive happenings at the rail yards.
Sure.
But kind of use the rail yard as the basis, as the setting, and that would be kind of a final product that the students involved in the classroom process at the site would kind of be immersed in and involved in, instead of just kind of pie in the sky, kind of a real generalized kind of focus in terms of what product they want to produce coming out of this participatory process, educational participatory process of CNM. And I think there's a lot of potential, because basically, right now, Mr. Chair, a lot of the films that happen at the rail yards where they use mainly the machine shop for some of the background and setting, a lot of times it's films having to do with kind of crime, cartels,
Dystopia.
Dystopia. Okay.
yeah, maybe that is the term. Instead of kind of really kind of intense kind of filmmaking that speaks to the culture and the history of what the rail yard was all about.
Sure.
And I think we should kind of throw out that kind of opportunity, that kind of vision in terms of the students participating in that, because there's a lot of themes. Then, for example, the whole issue with unions at the rail yards, and how Chicanos and Afro-Americans and Mexican immigrants were basically excluded from participating because it was basically a white dominated union at one time, and the workers of color were kind of just, not not being a focus, so naturally you had that exclusion. Yeah, I mean, a storyline could be a Chicano family from South Broadway or Varela's kind of pushing the button with the union to kind of really open it up.
Mm.
You know, I mean, so that's what I'd like to see happen in terms of CNM becoming a component part of the, you know, of the rail yards, you know, in the future, instead of just kind of the presence.
Mm.
But that their presence has meaning,
Mhm.
you know, in terms of the larger picture that we want to accomplish, you know, with the rail yards.
Sure, good point.
I really appreciate that
Yeah.
thought, Representative, because. Yeah, you know, the interest of the movie industry has been about, oh, wow, look at this bizarre. Messed up location, we can use it for all sorts of scenarios, but the real history that those of us in Albuquerque understand about the rail yards is much deeper and more intricate and socially connected to these neighborhoods than that. You know, it's the major employer at that time of the city of Albuquerque, you know.
The state of New Mexico.
Yeah. Leba.
Yes, thank you. I'm so thrilled you brought this up. We work on this every day and we have for 20 years. Yesterday I had a group of theater people coming to see me who want to do exactly what you're talking about. And I'm begging that all the time. We have all that history at Wheels. We've got a book that lists every man who worked there between 1880 and 1940. We have oral histories. We have the photo. We have everything.
Mhm.
What is lacking is money. They're all in the same boat. If there were money available to do something like that, we've been begging for that for many, many years. I'd love to work with you.
Well, you mentioned
That's our,
holding classes there, that CNM could also
Absolutely.
hold classes within the museum.
absolutely, yes,
But also that
absolutely.
kind of a resource could inform your resources and your historic.
have it at our
could inform
fingertips.
That kind of
Yes,
a curriculum. if
thank you.
will.
That's exactly right. We've done many lectures, many presentations, many movies. We have it at our fingertips. We are waiting to make something major, exactly like you're talking about, with the right funds. I'd love to work with you. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for that discussion. Yeah, I guess we'll see how this evolves with CNM, but I mean, I would imagine that will develop into a capital request as well.
Right.
In the future, but we've been waiting a while to get CNM to really start doing something there. I think that original announcement was shortly after they tore up the Samotar contract. So
Yeah.
If I remember right. Any other discussion about the film school? All right.
Maybe when, Mr. Chair, when Lawrence comes back, you know, what is the status of some of the funding that some legislators have put towards the CNM project? With the rail yards?
Are you talking about capital funding for CNM?
Yeah, past capital.
Lawrence, the question is, do you know whether there have been some legislative capital appropriation to the rail yards just for CNM?
Not directly for CNM, just to, and I apologize for having to step out. I had a little emergency that I had to take care of, but it can wait for a second. So what, back to your question about why they're using the space. To some extent, it really relates to your comments after the question, which is it is a fascinating place for the young film artists, et cetera, and folks, young people studying film and digital programming, because for the very reason you described it, it's a great facility. It provides a lot of opportunity for folks to set up stages and do different things. And because it is so historic and those buildings are so magnificent, that really is an attraction for why CNM has actually been wanting to use some of that space for classrooms, is because they'll do the classroom training in the classroom and then get out and do the actual filming, et cetera. And look, I'm not an expert in this world, but I just know enough to be dangerous. But the lighting and the structures and how you put things together. So to some extent, it's a real live lab, if you will, for young people to learn the film industry. But secondly, I think that to your point, as it relates to how the movies have depicted the facility and and how they use it mostly for, as you say, is dystopia, as you talked about. I think there is some opportunities, and I do know that there are some folks now in the CNM world who are talking about there is much more history to these buildings than just the infrastructure. It's really the human stories of how the city was established, the families that came, the people that worked here, and the stripes, et cetera, that happened here. So I do think that's getting more and more attention on that. And I know that the state of New Mexico, for example, did do some true New Mexico work there to try and, if nothing else, at least begin to show that this is part of the history of the state. We have an amazing history as a state anyway, but this is one piece of it that sometimes gets overlooked in terms of how this, affects some portions of New Mexico, especially with the way the railroad was built along the corridor and how many cities are actually right next to the railroad line. So having said that, they don't have, that I'm aware of, direct capital funding at this point from the state. They did pass a bond issue in 2019 to the, and the citizens approved to build a digital film program facility for CNM, which is really why we're at a point where we're having this discussion with them, because they do have some funding to do this. And because it is an opportunity for us to, to really utilize a building that has got a lot of that natural history and also architecture. So instead of reinventing the wheel somewhere else, come and invest in the redevelopment of an area and use it to the betterment of the community for all the things you talked about, which is the history, nature, et cetera, of educating even our own children who may not even know what the history of the yards are, et cetera, and then also giving them the venue to learn and to expand in an industry that really is growing in New Mexico and is important to the state. But I'll make sure I pass your comments on to the CNM representative and make sure that I love the idea, as Councilor Benton said, that there's really some historical conversations. And I know that the neighborhood's been talked to us about a lot about just the families that live there and ensuring that there's a place at the yards for that historical catalog of families and human interest stories that occurred there, that so they're not forgotten. And so there's a way to celebrate that into the future. So we're really interested in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an appetite. Obviously, there's a valuable cultural, local, educational opportunity there, but I also think there's a national interest and curiosity about Albuquerque. Whether you like Breaking Bad or not, we're on the map as a movie making place, but also as an interesting place, just a flat out interesting place. That's what I think is so cool about that thing, despite the storyline of Breaking Bad, and the production people from Breaking Bad have been very good promoters of our community and of our state. They love working here, and I think we've been on the #1 in the Movie Maker magazine for 6 years running now.
Mhm.
So, but with regard to the rail yards, it seems like we could bank, if you will, on that publicity and that excitement around Albuquerque and spin off more with regard to the rail yards in terms of telling our stories. So I
We're gonna be
really,
breaking good, Councilor.
There you go. Yay.
I really,
That's right.
I really
That's right.
appreciate this conversation. Well, that's the update on CNM. Let's move on to the firehouse. Leva brought this up over concerns that they've experienced with what's going on at the firehouse recently, security, and of course, I've pitched in my meager city council discretionary funds towards the camera,
Thank you. Thank you very
video
much.
systems at Wheels itself, but
Thank you.
I just feel, I continue to feel like that's something that would be a fairly low dollar investment to get more camera security there. But let's just talk about the firehouse in general. And I'll just full disclosure, I've got a draft of a bill to make that a priority on the site in the short term, given especially that it's got a lot of woodwork that's deteriorating. Wood doesn't hold up well in our environment when it's not maintained, or any environment for that matter, but that's a concern of mine.
Sure. So I'm gonna start and then I'm gonna turn it over to Ed since Ed's our construction expert. I will say a couple of things. I too have been wanting to figure out how can we basically stabilize the deterioration that's happening with that building, because it is an iconic building and it's the closest to the streets that people see all the time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so Ed and I have gone through this, you know, it needs a new roof. There's lead paint in the building. It needs to be cleaned out internally. And then, of course, the exterior of all these amazing windows and the woodwork that needs to happen. And so we've been trying to get our hands around, or I had a wrap around the number that might be, again, maybe a legislative ask, just to stabilize that building itself. Ed can talk a little bit more about what he sees and what we can do on an interim basis. I asked him after you and I talked, if we could go in there and do some work to maybe at least cover the windows with some new wood, plywood or what have you, until we were able to get to them. I'd like to do something with those, Counselor, and all of you who are listening to this. Because I do think that if we wait too long, it's going to become to a point where we're going to lose that the historic nature of at least of the woodwork that's there. So Ed, why don't you give us an update on what the cost might be and what you're thinking?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go with the immediate issue at hand. We have seen an uptick in some vandalism on the site. You know, we've been on site and had a presence, contractors, construction things going on, Anthony and I being on the site every day. Since those have kind of come to a conclusion based on funding, we've seen an uptick. Anthony did get the building secured. We had a break-in and damage to some doorways on the ground floor, and we did go ahead and secure the upper windows. We have been trying to take care of the deteriorating wood and the windows. We do have a design package that's probably 75% complete that would stabilize the building. We also have a structural issue on the northwest corner that needs to be addressed as well. We've got some settlement and foundation that needs to be dealt with, and a little bit of drainage. That's probably getting closer to $1 million in this environment. When we put that package together, it was more like a $600,000-700,000 deal. The roof does have asbestos. We do have lead-based paint throughout. Some of the lead-based paint we would like to remediate, and some of it we'd like to wait, because some of it is the internal paint. And if the ultimate use was to sheetrock the walls, that takes care of the lead-based paint. So encapsulate. So we don't want to run in and deal with that until we really have a tenant and understand what the use might be. So we do have some drawings that, you know, we could dust off and pick up in a short period of time, but basically funding is an issue. You know, we've had a fairly generous amount of money recently, but with buildings of this magnitude, money doesn't go very far. So we're probably looking at around $1 million to do a stabilization package, not getting it in position to develop it, just to stabilize it and deal with all of the issues that are adverse to its long-term health. Okay, that's probably in the neighborhood of about $1 million.
I mean, we could describe it, at least this stabilization of the building as a shovel-ready project with 75% design.
It is. We basically did not take it to permit, because if you take it to permit and you don't go to construction,
you start the clock.
You got to start over again. So we did not take the set to permit because of lack of funding. But it's at least 75%. It would just have to be dusted off and submitted through permitting, and then figure out what construction mechanism we may use. But given funding, it could go pretty quick.
Well, let me know how I can help, because our office prepares the requests. I mean, I know the administration has their own list, but just let me know how I can help with that, because I think that's you know, just as an architect myself, that's a very prominent and iconic building. And one thing I mentioned to Lawrence on the phone the other day was that I think I know that Lee Gamelski is the architect. That's good, because he's a historic preservation guy. Also happens to be a restaurant guy. That, I think that's a good fit, but with regard to the contractor, that it really needs to be somebody who has a very, very good woodworker. Subcontractor as part of their team, because there's so much wood restoration involved.
Leslie has been doing some work restoration on the windows. But yes, we need a larger effort than that. And we do have several local contractors that have very good woodworking shops within their corporate structure, so they wouldn't even have to go out to subs necessarily. Basically, we can connect all those dots given funding.
All right, so I would hope Representative and Senator that we would have that as part of the package that Lawrence is talking about delivering to you in very short term. So we've got all ours in from the council side, but maybe administration to give us something. And we'll beat the drum until we get it for you. Representative.
You know, whatever is presented by Lawrence and the city administration in terms of the funding priorities for the rail yards. You know, I think it behooves the city to have a priority list of what is first, what is second, what is third. And instead of just kind of lumping the whole proposal together.
You're talking about the entire city proposal as opposed to just this one?
No, I'm talking about the priorities for the rail yards.
Right, okay.
The funding priorities, capital outlay funding priorities for the rail yards.
Got it.
Because I don't know what else is gonna be brought forth aside from the firehouse project.
Well, this roof, 17 million is a big bite, obviously. And we do have our capital
17 million for
the roof of the machine shop. Yeah, I mean, to me, that would be a big priority, but I have to realize it's a huge ask. And, what's our local match going to be on that? I know they're also seeking other grant funding, as far as I know, correct?
Yes.
For that particular piece. This one is something that's right on our plate. And so I'll have a discussion with Lawrence if he's not back for the conclusion of this meeting about that, about listing a rail yard so that you know what's coming, even if it's not this year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Leva? Let me get Senator while we're on a legislative topic.
Yeah, just on that topic, Mr. Chairman, my current Senate district in 2 years will be split into a number of pieces. 2 of those pieces will be involved with the rail yards area, and I think Senators Duig and O'Neill ought to be contacted to be supportive of this effort. They'll be new to the area, but they'll be eager to support things that would be seen as part of their portfolio.
Good.
Thanks for pointing
That's
that out,
good,
Senator.
yeah.
We have to keep that in mind. And so we'll make sure they're included in these communications.
Good.
Leva?
I feel after doing this for 30 years, we sometimes are working in a vacuum, and I'm curious, would it be intelligent to try to get a tenant for the firehouse who would be interested in helping fund that to make that into a restaurant, if that's what we're going to do? We keep fixing and doing, but we don't really know why or what. I don't know. Would the city be interested in? I get people constantly asking me, what's the firehouse? Can I put a restaurant there? What can I do? We're working on it all the time, but I don't have the authority to work on it or to fund it. But could we put out a call to guys who own restaurants? Would you like to come on the rail yards? And this is what would be involved in doing that.
Yeah, we do have Diane Dolan here is also, it has a long history, and we
Oh, I
also
know.
have Terry Brenner, our MI.
Yeah, so I pose this,
Director.
I pose this to the city.
Yeah, and just as a little bit of background before that conversation is like, what we have focused on thus far has been to get what's called a cold dry box in as many buildings on the
No,
site as we
I
can.
understand, yeah. no.
Sooner rather than
Sure.
later. So that still leaves the big $17 million roof,
Sure.
but it includes something like the firehouse, which is cold, but not dry as far as I know.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
And certainly, and it's unique in that it's got all this exterior woodwork on it. So we'll go ahead and throw that open. Terry, you have any comments or I mean,
Yeah, I'll just say that, we did at the MRA put out an RFP, reference earlier to a couple of those projects. The Spirit Station type of project, but I think what we're talking about today is essential to us even preparing it for RFP. A restaurateur is not going to want to come in and stabilize the foundation or put in a new roof.
Right.
So as far as a stage, referencing back to what the representative just mentioned a few minutes ago, as far as sequencing and what's a priority, we have to stabilize this building first before we can even consider offering it up to somebody, because it would be very unusual for a restaurateur to come in and decide they want to do that level of renovation.
yeah, I mean, I think
I
that's
understand
exactly
that.
right.
Well,
No proposal for a private development of any of these buildings is going to include complete restoration of the cold dry box,
well, I don't, yeah, I agree. I don't think we could anticipate that, but maybe I was thinking some kind of a partnership with somebody who's strong, who says, if you do X, I will do Y.
yeah, well, I mean, I think
Not ready, we're not
a
ready.
given, no matter who the proposer is going to be the city's going to be put on the hook for
I
providing
agree. Oh, I'm
an
sure that's
appropriate shell.
I'm sure
An
that's
appropriate
true.
shell for the building. So when
sure
people
that's
like that
true.
come along, absolutely you should pass them along to probably to Terry's office.
Okay, good.
And
I will.
and
Try to
then,
bombard you, Terry. Okay.
but what we've concentrated on here on this board has been try to stabilize these buildings
Of
thus far.
course, of course. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I might just say one more thing, I failed to mention, Anthony Villanueva is sitting way in the corner over there. Anthony is our DMD project manager as well, working with Ed on the rail yard. So for those of you who lead by others in the community, Anthony is always available too.
Thank you.
To provide some information, et cetera, and he's the city sort of really coordinator for the construction piece. But to the last point that Terry made, that has always been our number one priority, right? When we've talked about the rail yards from day one, which is we've got to get these buildings into a cold shell space, kind of structural sort of stability before we can get a private sector investment or any investment, quite frankly, simply because no one's going to go in there and stabilize the buildings or come to these buildings and get them stabilized, because they can go to other buildings in the city that are already ready to go. So we do have to get them to that place at a minimum.
Yeah.
So that we can then entertain uses and opportunities.
And that's very common, that asbestos removal, things of that sort, that at least the answers are there for them when they come in, even if it's for some of this interior lead paint type things, that they understand completely that there are no environmental questions as well. That's why things are done this way on this or any other building.
Yeah, and then the last piece is we are looking at putting in some funds to add to the counselors' funds to do more cameras on the site and connect them to the RDC so that way they're on the real-time crime center, so that we can make sure that we can monitor what's going on in the yards on a 24/7 basis through APD. So we're in the process of getting that put together. So hopefully that'll help with the continued security concerns that people have.
Thank you.
All right, we've gone over our time a little bit already. We really appreciate everyone's participation. And we do have our next regularly scheduled meeting, April 5th at 8:30 in this room, and probably will also be available hybrid on Zoom. But we do have that schedule of 3 meetings per year, so everybody just be cognizant of that and those dates, and ask Nathan if you don't have them handy yourself. But we try to schedule those around the legislative session also, and make sure that our friends are accommodated and we're timely as far as the discussion. So thanks, everybody. Happy New Year. Thanks everyone who participated.
Feel free to clean out what's left of the burritos, board members first, and then the general public can follow afterwards. All right, thanks, everybody.
Sure.
You want to add to, or if you want to, whoever you want to. Then just-
Thanks.